Welcome back. So this is quite different. We try to do a large variety of still lifes here, so that you get a little bit of a taste of everything. And with this setup, it really is reminiscent to me of Jean-Baptiste Simeon Chardin's work, who is one of my first loves with still life painting. And he wasn't a still life painter that would do a lot of florals. He did a lot of kitchen scenes, actually, and some of the first paintings I ever copied were actually by him. So and this is kind of different. This is actually a failed demo painting panel that I scraped down to use today. It is dry, so I do occasionally work on a dry surface, so you're going to see how that plays out today. The only thing is that I can't wipe out for my lights. So again, I do like to use my thirds to get a sense of proportion, because look how long that handle is here, and pretty much, the pot takes up like the first entire third of the canvas. And then we've got the lid. There's not a lot of height in this composition. We are going to have, this cloth that comes over the edge here. So let's just look at that angle right quick, get an idea of that. I think this maybe could go up a little bit taller since we have the cloth down there. And then once we kind of decide on that, our jar is going to go about here. We're just going to do a simple rectangle shape. You could also do just a simple square or rectangle to get this little tomatillo started. Let's see. It's easy to make things bigger or smaller when you're doing this, when you're using just rectangles and triangles and circles, and then you mass in, you're able to adjust your proportions quicker and easier than just doing precise contour drawing. So, and this way, I don't really have to take time to do a thumbnail sketch. I can just, knowing that my thirds are really a strong guideline, I can pretty easily get my proportions on the fly here. So I'm going to say our knob is going to go up here. I'm just using burnt umber, maybe a little bit of black just to get it a little bit darker. And now I'm going to readjust the height of all of this and also this handle. I still feel like I shortchanged the handle. I don't really want it to come directly out of the side, so I might have to shorten it up a little bit. Now, underneath this, one thing you're going to notice with eye level, it's all about reading the picture left to right or right to left or up and down, whereas some of the other compositions we've been working on this month are more about depth into the picture. And one thing with that you notice is that the ellipses are pretty much straight across in this eye level. It's quite a fortuitous benefit to to us with this eye level. It's a little bit easier to get your perspective correct, or I guess not easier, it's just not even a challenge at all, really. The ellipses are pretty much just straight across. And yeah, so all right, I'm going to put some of this back here as well. For cast shadow, this is going to be pretty much a chiaroscuro painting, where it's all about light against dark. Again, some of our other setups this month have been about, middle tone, or even high key with color and light and dark against those backgrounds. So in this case, we're going to go for more of a dramatic, darker background, at least over here. And then by the time we switch over to this side, we're going to get lighter. I do know that I'm going to have that little black lid and then some black here on the label. And I apologize, this part of the label is taken off, but I love it when it's still there, so I'm going to make that up. You know, that little band there that connects on the label. So I'm just using straight ivory black for this part, and then where else might some straight ivory black show up? It might be underneath the rim here. I really like to push these darks, especially with a dark background painting, because this background back here is never as dark as, say, my darkest accent. So I'm going to add in some raw umber to this, some Naples yellow light. Let's get something kind of lighter. Let's put some burnt umber into that. It's a little green. I don't mind it green, but it's a little maybe green. It's amazing how just raw umber and Naples yellow goes very green. You could also do, actually this is a really beautiful soft gray. If you do ivory black, raw umber, and white, that's a really soft neutral gray. Let's actually mix some of that in there. I like that. But this is a good place right here to look at that value contrast. Now you can kind of start, you know, getting the actual shape of your little mustard jar here by cutting out the contour. Again, I'm still sticking with straights though, straights and angles, and just turning my brush to the side to kind of cut in. But I feel like straights and angles tend to look more structural. They're also a heck of a lot easier to draw, really, than curves. Curved lines tend to look very flimsy, floppy. I want to carve this little handle out, so I'll put some light background color there. So just kind of carve that out. Now, something that we really need down is a lot of this white. I'm just using straight white right now. White now. Straight white now. It's so funny. Oh man. You know, sometimes after you've been painting for a while, it's just like, I can't talk anymore. The words, I'm like, all of a sudden mixing up all my words. But so getting all these, you know, some of our extremes, like our darkest darks, our lightest lights in, and then we've got sort of our darker middle tone in the background back there. This can all get adjusted further as we work the painting, but for right now, I think it's really imperative to have it in place for the other values. We can paint more color and whatnot back into it. But so since I used up all my white on that, also just to show you, for example, painting into this wet white, you can take like this background color, and for example, there's this little crease here. You can get that angle in there, and you can mix this in like wet into wet. Can even kind of layer some more white over top if it's too dark. That's one way you can start to kind of get some of these little nuances in this cloth. And I do think that fold is, again, sort of fortuitous that it's there, because it kind of points us right up to that little, what's it called? That little jar of French mustard seeds. They are so good. Oh my gosh. I love putting them on a loin of pork. Oh my goodness. It's so yummy. You could tell it's almost dinner time. I'm getting hungry looking at all of this. All right, so just to show you how you could, you know, and if you want to make it lighter, of course you can add more white, more yellow, but you know how you could kind of get some of these folds. Or they're not really folds, but I guess like little dimples and creases in the cloth. Sometimes on a dry pre-toned canvas, you can also leave some of the tone of the canvas, and that'll work too. All right, I think what could be really nice is getting in some of that green, because this is so neutral. So let's start with the shadow. It's always nice to start with the shadow first. I'm going to do black, cad yellow deep. I'm going to throw a little bit of that red oxide in there just to warm that up. I kind of would like it to go a little more green, so I'm going to put in a little bit of ultramarine blue. So we need a form shadow here. It's going to be quite circular, or like a little crescent shape with the shape of the tomatillo. This one has a cast shadow on it. That actually has to go darker because it's a cast shadow. Cast shadow here. And the cast shadow on this tomatillo is actually darker than the background. And then we need to go back a little bit lighter again. But you know, I don't want to go too light on the form shadow on this one, because this is really the last thing on the canvas. Now I do want to play up, however, all this reflected light. I'm going to do some white, some Naples yellow. I do want to, however, play up all this reflected light in this one from this white cloth, if I want that white cloth to feel like blasted out with light. Now, it's like, boy, that doesn't really look right, does it, right now? But it will. We just got to get some light on there. So some ultramarine, some cad lemon, to get the tomatillo color. And we want to put that on nice and thick. We've got also some white is in there. We've got to kind of slow down as we approach this little tricky area over here, and I kind of just cross hatch that into the shadow. There's also, this starts to change direction, so use your brush strokes to describe both texture and how the form is turning. So these little tomatillos actually do have those little, I don't know, they're kind of like little striations. Something this small, and again, you guys can paint these bigger than me, but something this small may require a smaller brush. We've got this, you know, the stem. So I'm going to do some ultramarine blue and some cad yellow deep, just to get the dark quality of this little stem here. I actually think it should be lighter than that. You don't want to interrupt your shape of light too much. So sometimes something does look very contrasted, but you don't want to have too big of a stop, I don't think. And then we've got a cast shadow, and this kind of curves with the shape of this form. A little more ultramarine since it's a cast shadow. Now you can also use that color, you know, to just indicate a couple more of these little guys here. These little creases, I guess. I don't know what, because they're kind of covered in this paper-like stuff. So those can be a touch darker. Again, we don't really need all of them. We just need a couple indicated. Be careful not to lose the start of that form shadow. It easily does get lost, especially at this scale. So the start of the shadow right here, that's your darkest part of the shadow. And so you do have to be careful whenever you're putting in reflected light and such, not to totally lose it. so happy I got some more Vivas. Yay! Now, some of this lettering you could even say kind of scrape through or draw through if you wanted to. I'm going to do some yellow ochre. We're just going to kind of get that in there. I'll do that black back on top again here in a minute. Okay, and then red oxide. With that, let's get this a little bit deeper, richer on this side for some of those little seeds that we're seeing through there. Really, the tone of the canvas seems to work quite nicely for this. I just need a little bit of a darker edge against the background. And then let's do some yellow ochre with some Naples yellow for some of the gold band on this. Some juicy stuff. Maybe even some of this lettering up here. Just kind of skimming that cross back to that ivory black, but this time with a little bit of white in it because there is light on this. So we have to make sure it does look lit up. Same thing here. This part does get some light on it, so here's a nice area you can use your brush to kind of push that paint up. I mean, I literally do push paint around. So it's part of why I say that, so much. Okay, good. And then highlight on that right about, where should we put it? Oh, let's put it here. Highlights are really important to show like where a form is connecting, where it's really changing direction and connecting. So pears, jars, vases, they have what I call neck and shoulders. They look like where the neck meets the shoulders, So that's a really good spot to get a highlight. And then the gold actually has a little bit of highlight on it as well. So I like to use a palette knife just to get that to sit. On top, wet and wet, the highlight on gold or brass wrapper stuff should have a little more yellow in it versus highlight on glass. Sorry, it took me a minute to think about that. Okay, I'd like to just put in real quickly a little bit of lettering. I feel like this looks better if I don't try so hard. We don't really need to read the thing, do we? Maybe that's enough just to give it some character. Okay, back to that ultramarine blue and that cad lemon I had over here. Now this one, I'm going to warm it up a little bit since it's back towards the back with some cad yellow deep. We only see a little shape of light here. I'm going to kind of soften it into this edge. Tickle, tickle, tickle with the tip of my brush. Okay. And a little bit of highlight. Not too much though. And now that I'm looking at this, I think we really need stronger shadow shapes. I need to go a little bit darker, a little bit warmer, more blue, more burnt umber. You don't want to go too cool. The blue is going to make it cool as well as darken it. So yeah, I think that'll be like a nice stop to the painting. And now the moment we've all been waiting for. This pot. Yay. Exciting. I've been dying to paint this little guy. So hard to paint it outside of context from the other objects though. So, okay. So that's the cast shadow underneath that little brass, I don't know what it's called. Well, the handle. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get in, add some of that lemon with the tomatillos. One thing that makes metal look like metal is the fact that it's reflective. So we get reflected light from the tomatillos. We get white cloth reflected light. Gosh, we even get some little, mustard seed reflected light here. You want to make sure all of that just blends together quite nicely. If you get it too light, add back in something darker. One thing I don't want to lose is my back edge here being a dark against the light of the background. Now, I can also make my background lighter there as well. Just because I put the background in once does not mean that I just don't touch it again. I'm going to switch to a bigger brush. Okay, with this, I think you kind of have to pick a color, and so I think since this originally was copper, I'm going to do some oxide, some cad yellow deep, some Chinese orange. I think we're going to have to neutralize that a little bit though, so grabbing some of the background color. I think we need more red oxide. So you kind of have to pick a color on something like this that has a lot going on, and I think in this case, since it is copper, we know that copper is generally in the red and orange family. If you need to go a little bit darker or a little bit duller, use some burnt umber, use some background color, because we do have to have some other temperatures in here. So once you get that base color down, then you can start to get in some of this neutral, and in fact you can really steal a lot of it from that background. So I see a lot of that showing up here underneath the lid, also a lot of it here. So little bits of broken pieces of color. I also see like some purple stuff going on, so I'm going to use the ultramarine and the red oxide with my gray color from the background to get some of those violets in. All right, now this is a top plane, so this is going to get a little more light. We're also just going to have this really fabulous sharp edge there for the lid. Isn't that fantastic? So exciting. Okay, and what's even more exciting is, you guessed it, the sharp, brilliant highlight that's going to be on here. Hey, come back over here. And we actually, it's like a double highlight. I think because so much of the copper is kind of worn off, it's now doesn't have as much local color in it. I think we need more of that purple stuff. I'm seeing more, and even blue, more blue. Yes, cool on warm, that's always exciting. Make sure the value stays very close. If it goes too light, it's going to start standing out too much. But I think that works out beautifully. Could definitely get more white in the underplane here from the cloth. Maybe not all the way over there, but cast shadow disappears sometimes, so bring it back underneath. I don't feel like that should be quite that intense. Of course, there's also some of those little black things going on that could be challenging to get. Make sure, use your strokes purposefully. try to build, you know, we don't have a ton of visual interest here on this object, but we do want to emphasize the part of the form that's getting more light. And since this pot has gotten a little bit dull, I think I'm just going to make up a little bit of a little more intense highlight to make it a little shinier. It is quite dull now. Okay, the brass handle is a great place to notice that brass is much more yellow. So I'm just going to use some yellow ochre here. Let's just lay this stuff on. I guess I am going to have to take that off the canvas. Darn it. I think it'll be okay in this case. At least it's leading us in and not taking us out. It's funny how when you really want something to work out, you can find every reason why this time it's actually a good thing. More this Chinese orange, which is very brassy, I guess. The raw umber to get this. That's a great sort of cheater brass color. And this brass is incredibly shiny, very polished up here. So I'm going to use some Naples Yellow Light straight for the highlight. So on metal, what do I want to tell you about metal? Oh, the highlight has more local color. So unless, like for example here where the metal's really been, the color metal plating has been worn off, but obviously you could fake that as well. You could make it more metal-like, but I digress. Okay, a couple more little highlights here, and then we get another one here on the edge. Okay, on that. Okay. I think using some burnt umber would be helpful just to really deepen this form shadow a little bit more. Geez, I feel like I need even more, like a touch more yellow, more brilliant yellow stuff around the highlight. Should have done that first, but I think that'll cut the mustard. Pun intended. Okay, now a critical thing is to use the background color with some white or Naples Yellow Light for some of the dusting that may be showing up on your copper pot there, and also maybe here. Still need to bring in a little bit darker background there on the left to make all of that make sense and make it pop. Yes, you know, just a fresh brushstroke. There's just nothing like it. Doesn't even, sometimes it doesn't even have to be in the right shape or the right color, but just, you know, a really clean, freshly applied brushstroke just looks gorgeous every time. So again, what did I do? I kind of lost the start of my form shadow here. So it's easy to do when you're putting in reflected lights. So make sure to bring that back. On these kind of rich metals, I think the umbers are great to use for that. We also need some cast shadow on the tabletop there. And there's just the tiniest little rim of light right here in front. It's really interesting that if you can get that, sorry, that's too yellow. Let's add some white, and with this background kind of stuff, let's calm this color down. We don't need it to be that strong. But if you forget to put that little edge of light in there, something just falls apart about the painting. So And then we can put in our table edge. It's going to be a little bit darker. You don't want to go too crazy here. Meaning not too colorful, not too much detail or intense perhaps. You know, last but not least, I would say I see some of that background gray showing up in the glass right about in here. And it's going to make that look a little bit more glass-like. Okay. All right, everybody, I hope that this has been helpful to you. Last thing I'm going to do is just darken this up to make all of that pop out and make a little more sense. All right, I wish you happy painting. Bye.